Well, I hope you're having a wonderful Saturday afternoon, and welcome to WFME Reports. I'm your host, Jay Trelease. We have a very interesting guest here in the studio. His name is Peter G. DeGrassel. He is an internationally renowned author, a columnist, a lecturer, and a business entrepreneur. He calls his home Hong Kong, and he's going to talk a little bit about that. He can also discuss a wide variety of issues within the area of his expertise in Sino-U.S. relations. And so many people are talking about these days China as an emerging power, and how does that relate with the United States? Let's welcome him. He is a fascinating guy. Peter, thank you for joining us here at WFME Reports.
It's a pleasure being here, Jay, and thanks for having me. It's a big world out there, and I love travel, and I enjoy meeting people, learning about different cultures, and trying to understand the geopolitical environment we live in, so that we can all hopefully leave a better place for our children and grandchildren. I do have 2 grandchildren, and they live in the States, and I also have a child in China, so the last thing I want to see is my Chinese child fighting my American siblings, which is why I'm encouraging America to embrace China the way China is trying to embrace America.
That is definitely a major theme in your life, Chinese and American relations. You do know that many Americans, and including myself, have a troublesome relationship with the Chinese. Not the Chinese people or Chinese culture, but the present Chinese government. And you and I spoke a little bit off air, and you gave some very compelling reasons why I should not think that way. Could you share them with our listeners?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Jay. I think part of the misperception has been brought about because of political spin by the career politicians who like to scapegoat and blame third parties for their own failings and failures. And the reason, for example, that I use the word made, M-A-I-D, in the title of my book, Custom Made Knowledge, is I refer to we the people as maids, because we're constantly cleaning up the mess that career politicians create and leave for us to clean up, but then they ask us to pay for the privilege. And I ask, why is it that we the people, we the maids, continuously accept this abuse? And a big part of that abuse is the misperceptions and I would dare say lies that politicians say to justify their failures. And one of those is to scapegoat and blame China. And a lot of China bashing has taken place the last few years because it is a convenient scapegoat. It's very easy to just label it the communist red devil, whatever you want to call it, which many politicians have called it that.
That is a bit emphatic, though. I mean, you don't hear that, and I have to stop you because that's the perception Americans have of the Chinese, that Americans are scapegoated in China to basically compensate for the lack that the Chinese government provides for their people. Is that true or not? I hear that from people who go to China. They even see banners bad-mouthing the U.S.
Well, I've traveled far and wide in China, and I haven't seen any of those banners. So, and that's in the big cities and the outlying areas. The misperception is that the Chinese manufacture all these goods and ship them to the U.S., and everywhere you go in the U.S., it's made in China. What people fail to realize is that most of the factories, over 60% of the factories, are not Chinese-owned. They're foreign-owned, many of them American-owned, Walmart being one such example. All China provides is cheap labor and cheap resources. They don't own the factories. And so most of the profit that is made in those factories doesn't go to the Chinese. It goes to the foreign owners of those factories.
I think Americans are aware of that because those jobs used to be American jobs.
That's correct. But it's the American factories that moved over there. And by trying to impose tariffs or other protective measures against China, all that's going to happen is those jobs will move to other cheap markets. They're not going to come back to America. They'll go to Bangladesh, they'll go to Cambodia, And so the reality is that corporate America is going to go wherever the labor is cheapest. So to get those jobs, those factory related jobs back to America, I think is illusory. And imposing tariffs only increases the cost of consumer goods to the American consumer and taxpayer. Why shouldn't the American consumer be able to get goods at a low price, regardless of where they're manufactured? Why should the American consumer be asked to pay higher prices because the politicians find it convenient to all of a sudden, for example, impose tariffs on underwear and bras? I mean, that is really going to help the American economy. Yeah, on the contrary, it costs the people that buy those garments more money.
You make a great point. But unfortunately, a lot of people are mourning those jobs and mourning that kind of life here in America, where America used to actually make things, and the people who made those things had jobs, and those jobs paid salaries where they could support their families. That working class has disappeared, and America doesn't make anything anymore. All America does is service people, and that service class is now disappearing to other economies such as India. So it's for some here in America a very thorny situation.
Well, it's understandable why people are upset, but whose fault is it? It's the career politicians who allowed it to happen, who allow corporate America to relocate those jobs elsewhere. It's not the Chinese fault that these factories come to China.
Yeah.
I mean, what has happened in China, a statistic that's overlooked, is as a result of all these jobs coming to China, over 300 million Chinese have been lifted out of poverty, where they have gone from literally living on less than $1 a day to now earning a few $100s a month. That's a population larger than the size of the entire United States. So let's look at the positive that has come out of this, which is lifting poor people in China basically out of poverty so that they can spend money buying goods. Many goods, by the way, over there are from the United States. It's the United States that imposes certain restrictions on goods to be shipped over there. I mean, the Chinese, like everybody else, love American culture. They love what America represents. I mean, even during
Do they?
Absolutely. I mean, look at even during Tiananmen in '89. It was the goddess of liberty, emulating the Statue of Liberty. They wear jeans. They wear T-shirts. They love listening to American music. They love watching American movies. They love everything about America. That they have a hard time understanding why America does so much China bashing.